So, you want to move out, but you can't. In this economy, in this climate, whatever you want to call it, it just isn't practical. This is a question you're asking yourself, I imagine, if you selected this video. It's one that I've definitely asked myself at the ripe old age of 30. I've been fortunate to be put in a circumstance where, I get along with my family being my mom. My dad passed away a few years back. And, well, without getting too distracted with that whole deal, it kind of throws a wrench in the idea of moving out as well, because it's no longer just about me launching per se, right? Like that's sort of the end goal, right? You want to be able to launch, whether you're a guy or a gal. You want to get out there and sort of make your mark on the world, as it were. But depending on the family situation you're in, they might need you. Now, my mom, she doesn't need me. She's like the greatest mom ever, super self-sufficient. She's a total badass. But also by that same token, she's someone who I want to be around and spend as much time as I can with. Because once you lose a parent, you start to realize just how fragile we are. Like the mortality of both yourself and the people around you starts to set in. So anyways, that's the end of that distraction I was going to talk about. We're concerned about actually moving out. And I guess the main thing I want to share is you should focus on why you want to move out. I know I kind of touched on that a second ago, but I want you to consider divorcing the idea that it has anything to do with other people's expectations of you. Look, if you're in a situation where your family is really abusive, which I know a few people who are in that circumstance, then yeah, get out of there as quickly as possible. Don't stick around for that. Or there's any other number of things that might cause you to need to get out of there. But if that's not really an issue, and from a financial standpoint, it's far more sound for you to stay at home, don't worry about it. It's not that big of a deal. I've spent, I'd say, the latter half of my 20s just reconciling with the fact that it's not that big of a deal. The last few partners I've had, the women I've dated, they've lived at home, and it's ranged from gals who don't really have so much going for them to women who are highly ambitious, highly motivated, and are trying to make an amazing career themselves. And, they're in the same boat. Just because that's kind of the way the cookie crumbles. There's people who are fortunate enough to end up in a circumstance where maybe they get a job and they can afford to hopefully invest in actual property as opposed to having to rent. God forbid, having to rent with roommates or friends. Not that living with friends isn't cool, but there is a possibility that might change the dynamic or the relationship you have with that person. But what I'm trying to say is that I am really doing my damnedest to not let the fact that I'm 30, I'm living at home, affect my mental well-being, right? Like, I'm still a productive member of society because I do think it is important to find something that you want to do, that you want to work on. That's what really gives us some, purpose, right? So I wouldn't worry about living at home too much if you're doing those things. And I don't want it to be a distraction. And yes, sort of the elephant in the room is, how do you go out with people when you're in that situation? Because there's a lot of people that might find that to be a turnoff, right? And all I can really say about that is find someone who doesn't make a big deal out of that, right? It's going to limit your options regardless. But I look at it this way. If someone you're going out with has a problem with you living at home, whether they do or not, then there's probably something else they wouldn't have liked about you anyway, or they would have found, because of the type of expectation that they have. So they're probably doing you a favor by, not wanting to engage with you. It just saves you the trouble of having to go on a meaningless date, as it were. I guarantee you there's plenty of people who are in the same situation as you. I'm one of them, if that's evidence enough. And would I like to move out? Yes, I most definitely would. But it's also not that big of a deal, right? It doesn't prevent me from doing anything. What is the actual difference? Okay, so I have more rooms allocated to me. I have to pay for that space, basically, right? Obviously if you're at home, then make sure, this is super important, you need to be helping your folks as much as possible. You need to go in, even if they're not charging you anything. In my situation, I'm not being charged rent. Like I said, super lucky. But that means that every time I'm at home, I think of the rooms I live in as, my space that I get to set up however I want or use however I want. And then everything else is something that I always need to be contributing to in some way, leaving it nicer than the way that sounds really basic, like, a toddler cleaning up after themselves. But sometimes that's what you have to break it down to be. Be proactive. How can I be of assistance to my mom, or in your case, your parents? If you do those things, then honestly, maybe it's better that you're at home. It alleviates their stress and their pressure. It alleviates your financial situation in a way. And, you'll meet someone who is probably in a similar boat, because there's a lot of us. It's not just a matter of lazy Gen Z or millennials. Like, just believe it or not, there are circumstances related to the development of a society that have an effect on these things. And obviously those sorts of things aren't in our control. If your goal is really to move out, you need to figure out a way to manage whilst dealing with that. It's just how it is. We were all dealt the cards of the time that we were born into. So let's make the best of it. I really don't have much more to say beyond that. If you have any stories or experiences you want to share, or kind of some mutual understanding that people want to talk about in the comments, or advice, I appreciate that, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Take care and good luck.